everybody. I'll go ahead and get us started. My name is Warren Doctor. I'm the President and CEO of the East Tennessee Historical Society. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming out today. I just, by show of hand, wants to know who's a member of ETHS. So some of us need to become members. I have to say that contractually. Before we get started today, I'm going to tell you about some upcoming events. Oh, wow, that really started echoing. Is that too much? I'll talk back here. So we have an event coming up on August 12th, which is an H3 event, which is our special membership level, which is called History Happy Hour, about Robin Goddard. We'll be speaking about Ann Davis, the mother of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. There's a lot of stuff coming up. In fact, we're hosting and working with Knoxville History Project on Friday and Saturday this week on the foundation of the Smoky Mountains National Park. On August 14th, we have another brown bag on the folk life and the laurel about the Jubilee Community and Arts in Knoxville History by Ethan Fullwood. And then what I'm extremely excited to tell you is that on August 17th, which is a Saturday from 10 to 4, we're doing our History Hootenanny, which will be focusing on country music. And not just country music, but music from East Tennessee. We'll be partnering with the Tennessee Theater. Wyatt Ellis will be there. We'll be showing the films. A major thanks has to go out to Eric, who's here in the crowd, for helping sort of organize some of this. And so we're really excited to be doing History Hootenanny. It's one of our premier things. I hope that everyone can come. But now on to our program today. I'm going to be introducing our moderator. I've been really excited about this, and Lisa and I talked about doing this, gosh, I guess almost at the beginning of the year, and putting this together, and I'm just really excited about it. So it's from Grassroots to Roundtable, Preserving Places and Stories, and I'm really excited to introduce our speaker, who I first became aware of in his podcast with Angela Dennis. And then I got to meet William, and we're very good friends. Of course, you know that he's the director of Black in Appalachia, and a very talented director and writer and media savvy person, who is incredibly dynamic. And I'm very proud to host him today and to host all of you. Thank you so much for coming and participating. I'm going to hand over to you, William. Thank you all.
All right, thanks for taking your lunch hour to hang out with us. I'm going to introduce our panel here. Adam Dixon, who I've known for quite some time, and we get into mischief together when we can. He's a community advocate and servant leader. Professional experiences include local government, higher education, the nonprofit sector. He currently works for the City of Johnson City, Tennessee, as supervisor of the Langston Center. If you guys have not visited the Langston Center in Johnson City, you should do that. You need to do that. You can't step into that building without knowing that it was once a black school, so that's good to know. He's the vice mayor on the board of mayor and alderman for the town of Jonesboro, and an adjunct instructor of political science at East Tennessee State University. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science from Carson Newman University, and a Master of Public Administration degree from Tennessee State University. So this is Mr. Adam Dixon. Next on the panel is Julia Daniel, who is also a good buddy of mine. Tri-County, she's of the Tri-County African American Cultural Museum and Mamie Carmichael School Organization in Oliver Springs, Tennessee. Up in the coal fields. She's a native of Roane County, Tennessee. Ms. Daniel proudly represents 3 generations of African American farmers and lives on the farm where her ancestor was enslaved in the 1800s. As president of the Mamie Carmichael School Organization, Inc., Daniel, along with other fellow residents of Oliver Springs, are passionate about historical preservation and have been instrumental in developing the Carmichael Park in Oliver Springs, Tennessee. The Tri-County is Roane, Anderson, and Morgan counties, correct? And if you've not been up there, you also need to go up there and visit Ms. Daniel. Next we have Rita Lorraine Hubbard, award-winning educator and children's author from Chattanooga. We've just become friends. So Award-winning author Ms. Hubbard is a retired special education teacher, 20 years, who now champions unsung heroes whose stories need to be told with courage and heart. Her books, which you can see there, include one that I've got quite a stack of, and I've been handing them out to people, The African Americans of Chattanooga, A History of Unsung Heroes, have garnered honors and awards. She's also involved in How to Sue the Klan film.
Yes.
Correct. If you've not seen How to Sue the Klan, it's about 4 women from Chattanooga that took on the Klan in the 80s. Right?
Yes, actually 5 women.
5 women?
Yes.
Yeah, so without any further ado, let's get into it. Let's have a hand. We're going to start with you, Adam, and just go down the line. Tell us a little bit about your community, where you're from, and how you got into the work that you do now.
Okay. Well, again, Adam Dixon, and proud resident of Jonesboro, Tennessee, Tennessee's oldest town, storytelling capital of the world. And Jonesboro, as I'm sure with Oliver Springs, and as I'm sure with other communities, are very special places. But we are the only special place. But we love Jonesboro, and always been a rich history in Jonesboro, as I suspect with most rural communities in central Appalachia. A situation where the communities are not, they're not idyllic or Pollyanna. I don't mean to give that impression. We know the role that race played. We know the role that segregation played. We get that, and maybe we'll even talk about that to some degree today. But there's also these moments of neighbors helping neighbors, and there's these moments of where character would drive, and there are also these moments of where people could, at least for the moment in the time, quote unquote, do well. And so Jonesboro is one of those places, and so we have our individual stories to tell. Being a young person who had older parents, and as I used to call myself, a late child, I grew up around people that at that time were in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and I considered those people to be my friends. And those people would tell stories. And so at a very early age, I would listen to the old folks. And that language now is called ageist and discriminatory, but the old folks were, you had great admiration and really reverence for the elders. And so the old folks would gather around and start telling stories, and you would try as best as you could to remember and keep. And so now that I'm in a particular place in life, those stories have really prompted a lot of the work that I want to do in terms of recognizing the history of Northeast Tennessee, Washington County specifically. But just again, very rich stories, and then walking by these particular places like the Black School in Jonesboro, which is Booker T. Washington School, or walking by the Black School in Johnson City, Langston High School, seeing a man who was my father who never cried, but seeing kind of a tear stream down his face as these places are boarded up, locked up in the late 80s and early 90s, and now those places are open back to the community. That's kind of how, I guess, for me, we got involved in this work, is being around people who had lived experience. And then I wanted to utilize my platform to try to figure out how could we reclaim these spaces, tell these stories, build community in the process. So, yeah, thank you for that. Yeah.
Julia, tell us about your community and how you got into doing the work that you do.
Okay, first of all, thank you. I come from a rich family history. I was given the name of Julian Smith Hopper Daniel. I was named after my father, Julian. His father was Julian. I had a brother before me who lived a week. His name was Julian. And then he passed. And then my baby brother, his name was Julian. And then in 1957, I think it was 57, I married a Julian Daniel from North Carolina who went to Knoxville College. And so when I had my children, everybody said, no more Julians. And so my daughter that's here today, we have a Julian Michael, Julia Janae. So history, and then my middle name was Smith after my mother's maiden name from Jefferson City. So I come from a long family of history. I do live in Oliver Springs, and I consider myself part of the fabric of Oliver Springs. Some people sort of laugh and they think that I'm the mayor. Don't ask me why. Don't ask me why. But I live on the farm that my ancestor was part of the plantation. Today, which I'm very proud of the history, we have 8 family members that live on the farm. And I think that's a blessing. In the community and town that I live in Oliver Springs, when you on the highway, people normally wave and toot. So, and then I say, well, they don't really know me, but they know of your family, they know part of your generation. So I think that's part of the rich heritage that we have. And even today on the farm that we live on, the highway is named in my mother, and she's from Jefferson City, so don't tell me how that happened, but it's Nanny Hopper Memorial Highway. So what we do in Oliver Springs, the people are very friendly, they're very respectful, and they support each other, which I think is great. And hopefully before you leave, we do have flyers for the October Sky. And I am a member of that 25 years plus. In fact, I was the chairperson. That's the 3rd week in October, October the 19th. We also have Heritage at the Depot. East Tennessee has been, this group here has been involved in it for several years. And it's really great. Slow down. We also really have a Soul Food Sunday. And Soul Food Sunday is not just fundraising. People come from Knoxville, Chattanooga, last time in February for our soul food. Sharon, my cousin, is agreeing. It's not just the food or raising money, but what's going on is fellowship. It's people sharing information and get to know each other. So with those type of things, I'm the president, which I'm very honored to be, of the Mamie Carmichael School Organization. It was established in 2012, and the mission is to preserve our African American history. We promote education, and we also work with the town on developing the Carmichael Park. And the Carmichael Park and Miss Mamie and the Carmichael organization is named after our teacher, Miss Mamie Carmichael, who actually came from Greensville, Tennessee. She taught 40 years. She even taught in Morgan County. Morgan County, part of Oakdale, had a colored school. She taught 30 years in Oliver Springs. She taught in Anderson and Roane County children. So the park and the organization is named after Miss Mamie, who was very, very dedicated. She taught the children to have pride in who you are. I'm not going to say hold your head up, but she always told us this. When schools are integrated and you go to a white school, you're going to have to work hard and probably work even harder. So she instilled a lot of things for us to do. So in 2018, our organization, we purchased part of the old Tri-County Mall, which is in Oliver Springs. And so this year, 2024, we was able to open up the Tri-County African American Culture Museum. Now, Tri-County is divided into Anderson, Morgan, and Roane. So we represent 10 to 12 towns and cities. And what we're doing is the road, what was it, Michelle? Road, thank you. I've got my talking points up front of me. It's the road to freedom. Road to freedom, we're looking at the past, the present, and the future. We do go back to slavery. We have the Jim Crow era. We also have when the National Guards came not only to Clinton, but they came to Oliver Springs. We have the road to freedom, which really entails education, how people walk round trip 8 miles to get to school, and when it rained, they would leave their books at a certain person's house, and then the lady, some of their neighbors would help them cross the creek in a boat. So they were very dedicated to education. And then when they finished 8th grade, they went to a school in Harriman, which was called Jameson, for the 10th grade. One of my father's brothers, he was the valedictorian. Then they went on to Nelson Mary, which was in Jefferson City. And several people had to go there. Nelson Mary, you would only possibly come home one time a year or whatever. You stay in the dormitory or whatever. But then several people, I know more about my family than I do others, but they went on to Knoxville College after they left there. Then they became Tuskegee Airmen. So they went on to California. A lot of times people left this area for better jobs, better opportunities. But anyway, it's not just my family, but we had farmers, we have coal miners, and a lot of the coal miners, once they went in, they didn't want their children to have to go in the mine. So my cousin here, her father, he studied at the Bull Run. He was part of Knoxville College, and he studied the research on coal. And then later on, the same family and other people, we're all family, so it's not just my family, but they went on to become doctors. And then in June of this year, from that same coal miners family, we have members that have been inducted into the Hall of Fame at Johns Hopkins Women's Medical. And you can go online. She's been on PBS. My time might be running out, but anyway, I was supposed to. Anyway, we have a lot of rich history. And what I'm finding out, there's so much that we don't know. You know, just within the Tri-County area, we've got several people that have told me their relatives were Tuskegee Airmen. And they were also buildings that Fisk was named after them. In fact, Charlene Webster has been here about about a month ago, here in this building on some of her accomplishments. So what we're trying to do today, preserve our African American history, tell our story, and I don't have this cheat sheet, but well, I love to talk about the African proverb. If we don't tell our story, who's going to tell it? So we look at society today, how we've been shut out of history and everything. It's very important to tell our story. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Hubbard, tell us about your community and how you got into doing the work that you do.
I will, but first I want to say that's a tough act to
I'm nervous.
It was wonderful.
Thank you.
So I'm Rita Lorraine Hubbard. I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I want to start out by saying I was born a writer. I didn't just get into writing, just like some people are born able to sing and some people are born able to dance. I was born a writer. My family was one of the first few families to help integrate the schools in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Right.
So I want to go back to when I was in 5th grade. Schools had been integrated, and my family told me to always be aware of your surroundings, and that's part of what I do now. I try to be aware of my surroundings. When I was in 5th grade, my school took us to a museum. It was called the Mary Walker Museum. And when we got there, the person the museum was named for was gone. Of course, this was a former slave. But I was fascinated, even at the age of 10, 11, in 5th grade, because when we got there, the tour guide said, well, this lady was born enslaved. She was emancipated at age 15, but she didn't learn to read until she was 116 years old.
Wow.
And in my mind, even in 5th grade, I was thinking, well, what was she waiting for? What happened? and that never left my mind when I was young. And when I got older, I decided to research her story, and that became this book, The Oldest Student. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but I will say that the thing that really got me into writing about African American history was when I was younger, there were no books for African Americans. There just weren't any. And when I grew up and became a teacher, guess what? There still were no books. There were a few, but my students were all at-risk students. And they didn't see themselves. They didn't see anybody with skin like theirs. They didn't see anybody with disabilities or obstacles like theirs. So I started thinking, if nobody else is gonna write this, maybe I should write it. And that's how I got into doing what I do, is I looked around and I saw a need, and I tried to fill the need. One more thing too, I grew up hearing all the time, everybody gets their 15 minutes of fame. I grew up hearing that. But as I got older and older, what I realized was everybody doesn't get their 15 minutes of fame. So that became my mantra, is to try to preserve, like you said, but also first, before you can preserve it, you gotta uncover it. You gotta find it and then preserve it. So I said I wanted to shed light, shine that light on people who didn't get their 15 minutes the first time around. And that's where my books come from.
Man, I'm lucky. Adam, I'm going to kind of drill down a little bit, and if you can, and we'll go the same pattern. Talk about some of the lessons that you've learned in doing this work since you've been engaged for years, doing what you do in Johnson City and Jonesboro. Talk about some of the lessons you've learned, but also how you overcome some obstacles in your work.
Okay, so I guess just a little bit more about Dixon. My work, I guess, for the past 23 years has not been history specific. A component of it is history. I've often wondered, how do we move the African American community forward, particularly in Northeast Tennessee? How do we tell the story of black folks in Central Appalachia? And for me, a goal before I leave this earth, I would love it when people talk about African American studies, that Black Appalachia is just as much a part of African American studies as opposed to talking about the Black urban experience. Because the Black Appalachian experience is very rich to African American studies. I would love to see that. And so my desire, and again, the past 23 years, has been, how do we try to, again, uncover and unveil, but also build community and move forward. And I've done that in the political context. And but history has always been a point. Through the Langston Center, we have a threefold approach to our work. And again, the Langston Center is the former Langston High School. 2019, we were able to move into the space. As you heard me say, for years the place sat in disrepair and was pretty much dilapidated. But in 2019, we were able to move in as the Langston Center, and now we are the region's only multicultural center. And we have a threefold approach of respecting the past, recognizing the present, realizing the future. So I'm glad to know that Tri-County's doing it and leading the way with it. But yes, but we have that threefold approach. When we think about Langston and the work that we do, some of the hurdles that we have uncovered over the years, one such hurdle would be the national climate. And the national climate always seeps down to the local level. And so now you have to do, I think, very strategic work in conveying the fact that what may be national is not necessarily local. And then you have to also communicate in such a way that really affirms and uplifts the strengths of a community. So if you have not already detected, diplomacy is my superpower. I own that. And so when you take particular topics that, again, people wish to weaponize, you have to be very mindful about how do we, again, take what is meant for bad and turn into good. So when we talk about Jonesboro, for example, we talk about years of interracial cooperation. And then through telling the story of African Americans in Jonesboro, we can see time and time again where there was instances of black and white working together. Now Jonesboro has a very special story. So we know that the first newspaper that was written promoting abolition was written in Jonesboro. We know that there was a Quaker presence in Jonesboro. And so that history kind of shapes Tennessee's oldest town. But yes, there have been hurdles. There have been hurdles, and some of those hurdles again are the national themes that again people wish to weaponize. Good case in point would be in 2020. We all probably remember that year. Everybody on the earth in some way dealt with 2020. And there were people out on the street nightly. And Johnson City was dealing with the pressure of nightly demonstrations. And so we had just opened our doors. The pandemic had forced us to close our doors for a period of months. And then we were able there at some point to get back in the space. And then there are these nightly demonstrations. And that's when we actually found our identity. Because there were folks in the community that were very stressed, very taxed, trying to figure out not only this whole idea of Black Lives Matter, they were trying to figure out the fact that there was a generational shift in terms of advocacy and movement politics. There were folks that were very upset with what they were seeing on TV, and these were people all across the racial spectrum. And so the Langston Center became Switzerland. And so we became a place where people on the far right could come and we could have conversations. And people that were very progressive and frustrated with the system, we could have conversations about the way government works and understanding government. And then people that really wanted to step out on the street, well, let's talk about Dr. King and let's talk about the way that the movement works and Dr. King's theory of nonviolent disobedience. So yes, there are hurdles, but I've always learned, and this is a lesson, and I hope I'm answering your question here, but one lesson, key lesson, is that there's always a workaround. And I think corporate life will tell you that there's always a workaround. And so you have to be mindful to figure out the workaround so that we can still get to the goal and still try to keep people together and getting to where we want to go. That's good.
Now, maybe, I could be mistaken about that. Maybe Carmichael taught for a little bit in Jonesboro. Did I send you that, I think?
Oh, yeah, she did somewhere up through there.
That's an aside, sorry, I was just.
You threw me off.
Yeah, sorry.
Rich history from Miss Mamie.
So let's talk about some of the lessons you've learned in doing this work over the years and some of the obstacles and how you've also overcome them.
Well, I guess one of the things in looking at, let's say, race relation, the Tri-County people have worked with the Grove Center. They've dealt with race relations, and they're having ongoing, I think they even call it suppers. Is that right, Sister Wash?
Yes.
They're having discussions and bringing people in to discuss things today dealing with race relation. And then how have I overcome, or how have we overcome? sometimes I felt like we have such a rich history that we're gonna have to do our own museum. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but it's to make people aware of what's going on, because I'm sort of uncomfortable when people invite me for February. I don't like just being Black History Month. My history is every day, and that's the way I feel. But people are very open, seem like today, and they want to learn more about your history. So hopefully we're doing better in society now. I hope so.
Have you, talk a little bit about the setting up of the Tri-County Museum and some of the work that you did and how that process has been over the years?
Well, we've had plenty of support from our legislators, money-wise, and as I said, fundraising, and we've also were able to utilize the prisoners volunteer. I mean, they're not volunteer, but sorry, but we've had support. We have had support within the town of Oliver Springs, and even getting involved. We've had the Oliver Springs Academy, which is part of the STEM group. They've had some of us at the high school, and they've written an outstanding article to, make it aware of what's going on. And then this summer, we had one of our, what's the name? Weaver, our niece.
Adeline.
We've had students to come and volunteer. So I think we've had good support, and I'm glad you did bring that up, because I forgot to mention it. On Saturday, August the 3rd, from 6 to 9 p.m., and you can pick up a flyer when you leave, we will be having our grand opening. And so we want to give back to, that's one of the things, we want to share with people to let them know that we just don't take, we give back. We've had people to go to other countries to help build schools and different things, helping hand. And then we even have one group from Oliver Springs, is in part of Africa, that they have a school over there like Oprah Winfrey. So, I'm just saying, we want people to know we don't just take, we give back. And I think when people see that, they see that you've got a lot to offer. I don't know if that answers your question.
That's a good question.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Hubbard, the same question to you. Same question to you. Talk about lessons learned and how you've overcome some of the obstacles in your work.
Okay, aside from the lesson that there are some amazing old stories out there waiting to be told, aside from that, I really learned that history is hard. It's really hard because you have to uncover it first. And I keep saying that, I don't know if everybody has a clue what I'm talking about, but for instance, when I wrote this book, African Americans of Chattanooga, and this has been adopted by the state of Tennessee as part of our official bibliography. But this book took me 7.5 years to write, and there was no catalog. I had to just go to the library, pull up the microfiche, and start with a year, January 1st of a year, and just start going through the microfiche to find stories about African Americans. It took me 7.5 years to do that. So history is hard. You've got to uncover it. Then you've got to figure out how are you going to present it where people will accept it, because big amounts of information are hard to digest. You got to figure out which story do you want to tell first. I'm a person that goes off in that many directions, so I have to figure out, okay, what am I going to tell first? You have to figure out who your audience is, and then even if you figure out who your audience is, since I'm a writer, and I don't want to do this all myself, I've done, I had a line of niche calendars that I did for 10 years. They were called Shades of Greatness. They were in 17 states, only by word of mouth. But it was too overwhelming for me to research, design the calendar, print. I was doing it all, y'all. I was doing all of it. So now as a writer, I like to go through a publisher. So you take your work to a publisher and then they decide, somebody was asking me about illustrations, they decide who your illustrator is, they decide when the book is gonna come out. So, for instance, this book I wrote in 2016, it debuted in 2020, so it took 4 years for the book to come out. This book was a manuscript competition, I think it was global, I can't remember, but it won first place in that manuscript competition in 2012. It didn't come out to 2018. So you're writing and people are saying, oh, you're so talented, but you don't have any money though. You have absolutely nothing. But then it can catch up with you, you know, the finances and recognition catches up with you. But I'm just saying, I learned that history was hard, but I also learned my biggest lesson, it's worth it. That's what I
Amen.
All right, y'all doing okay? Doing all right?
I'm doing fine. If I could just work along with what Ms. Hubbard was saying, I think that shaping the narrative is critical work, and it's not for the faint, because most of Black history certainly tells us a story of turmoil, trial, war. But there's also stories of perseverance, character, hope. And so shaping the narrative and thinking about the broader American narrative. And I would argue that now we're living in a time where we need to hear stories that kind of help us think about the significance of who we are as Americans. And so actually crafting the narrative, I think, is very hard work, because again, as you uncover the history, it could very easily leave a bad taste in your mouth, you know. And so how do we uncover? How do we discover? How do we tell truth, but also convey it? And again, as Ms. Hubbard just eloquently said, how do we convey it in such a way that it really resonates with who we are as a society? So I think that's a powerful point, very powerful point.
Julia, just bouncing off that a little bit, now we're going off script, thanks. Just bouncing off that a little bit, you've had to also do that with the museum. Like there's certain themes within the museum that you've had to curate and figure out how to craft that story. Can you talk a little bit about that, the themes of the museum?
Well, I guess, I don't know if we're talking about lynching. Is that one of the items you're sort of throwing out?
Is that in the museum?
Yes, and thanks to you, who've done additional research, I think, to me, I hope I don't get off the subject, but we first need to be proud of who we are. You know, there's the good, bad, and ugly. I don't know if that was Clint Eastwood or not, but we need to be proud of who we are. And we do have some things that we have to be very sensitive to, but we can't change history, you know, and so we have to try to be, I don't know if I can say positive, but what I found out, like I'm from the 3 counties in Tri-County, and most people think lynching came from Morgan County. But when I took tours to Alabama, they've got outstanding museums on just lynching and different things. Lynching was in Roane County, it was in Anderson County, and Morgan County. And right next door, you know, we had the slave block, we had everything. So we're not trying to hide history, but we try to tell it that, I don't know if we want to use the word positive, but just tell the truth. I have talked, one of the people that's helped us to be established in the museum, as I said, we've had outstanding support. He is actually the judge in Oliver Springs. And so I've talked to him one-on-one, and he says, well, if you don't tell it, he said it might repeat itself. So, you know, we don't want to cover up anything, but we're not pushing it, but we're not hiding it. Now, I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Ms. Hubbard, you worked with that film, How to Sue the Klan.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that and what that narrative was?
Yes, I can. So, I'm gonna be dating myself now because, I remember being a new mother of my first son in 1980 when I heard over the radio that 4 black women, that's what they said at first, 4 black women had been shot by the Klan. Later on, a 5th woman came forward. Fast forward to 2020, during the pandemic, a producer called me. This producer was from, I think he was from New York, but his wife's family was from Chattanooga. So he called me and we had coffee like 6 feet apart. And he told me that he wanted to do a documentary on how the women that got shot. So he hired me as the lead researcher. I went to the newspaper, the Microfiche. Like I said, I went to the Microfiche and found the storyline. I knew where the starting point was, which was April 1980. But if there are any writers in here, any detectives in here, any sleuths, you know what I'm talking about. As I started in April, my first article said, this shooting happened because of something that happened 2 weeks ago. They didn't say what date, so I had to go to find the paper from 2 weeks ago and figure out what in the world happened 2 weeks ago. And when I found that out, then they said, well, 3 weeks ago, these people burned crosses on somebody's lawn. So I had a timeline that was going this way and this way at the same time. But anyway, I researched this for 8 months, and then I handed it over to the producer who got other producers involved. Attorney Ben Crump is involved with it now. He has become one of our major producers. And that was from 2020. We're actually out now. We have won 3 Best Documentaries and Best Short Film Awards. I wrote the women's names down. I'm not that good. I can't remember everybody's names. So I wrote the names down. Viola Ellison, Leela Evans, Fannie Mae Crumsey, Katherine Johnson, Opal Lee Jackson. These women, well, 4 of them had just come out of a little night spot like a bar, and they were walking home down our major black street at the time, which was 9th Street. And some Klansmen rode through. They just wanted to stir up a little trouble, and they shot at them. And all of the women were hit. But when they went around the corner, another woman was planting in her garden, and they shot at her. She just so happened to be bending down, so the buckshot missed her, but it broke glass, and she got cut up from the glass. And so those women sort of went down in history, and well, they did go down in history, but what has happened now, I'm not the best spokesperson for this, but I will tell you, what happened is the lawyers at that time used an 1871 law from the law books. It was like a Klan law that you might not be able to get any money from the person, but you could get money from the organization. So they shut the organization down in a way that anytime that organization made a move against one African American or all of them in Chattanooga, that started in Chattanooga, that they would have to pay so much money. These women won over $500,000 in civil damages. They didn't win the criminal. The criminal, these guys were let go, but they won the civil decision. Now, did they get any money? They got nothing. But they went down in history, and there's one that's still alive, and we've got murals of them in the downtown area. So that's about all I can say. It's debuting around the country though, and if I need to email you, and maybe you all can put it in your in the newsletter. It's making its rounds everywhere. I think it was in Boston the last couple of days.
That's great.
Yes, Chris. So I've got one more question. I'll ask all three of you. So what's your hope for the future in doing this work? What do you see the need being, and what do you hope happens in regards to that need?
So for me, the future, I believe, is really trying to figure out how to introduce this to a new generation. In Johnson City, I will admit, it's somewhat of a struggle. History is perceived as 1492, 1619, 1896, and nobody wants to learn dates. But trying to figure out how to tell a story and tell a story convincingly. But now the challenge is that we live in a society where everything is very condensed and the attention span isn't great. And so now it's trying to figure out, how do I tell the story? How do I tell the story convincingly? And how can we capture a new generation? Because, again, this history is important. When you go one step further, there's a generation today that is probably living probably the most integrated that the society's ever been. And not only do they have friends of different, what we call races, but different cultures, people all over the world. And so now when you start talking about 1619 to 1865, 1865 to 1877, 1896 to 1965, it's really ancient history, because in their lives, they have friends who are Indian, African American, Asian, and so that's so foreign. And so on one level, we're so excited because we see, in a sense, a lot of walls torn down, bridges are built, but in terms of trying to uphold this history, and I hear Miss Daniel say it best, something that we should be proud of and something that's very beautiful. Even in the negativity and the hurt and the horror, it's still very beautiful because there's so many life lessons, and I'm speaking personally, so many life lessons that I think have made me the man that I am today. But trying to convey that to a generation that, again, is very much about today and the future, I see that as a challenge. And so I'm very hopeful that, again, before I leave this earth, that there'll be some folks that will really fall in love with the story and wanting to uncover the story and tell the story. So I'm hoping that I just keep doing what I'm doing. Yeah.
All right, Ms. Daniel. What's your hope for the future?
Thank you. I first would like to make sure that African Americans bring their artifacts, their history, and tell their story. And I would like to see, say for example, since we're here in Knoxville, say UT students come and do research there, dissertations or whatever. I think it's an exciting time for everybody to share their information. That's really what I'd like to see for the future.
Well, I agree with both my esteemed colleagues, and also I will say this, I'd love to see more of these stories become documentaries or some sort of video, and I'll tell you why. Think about the world now. Everything's video. Nobody has time to read. They think they don't have time to read. I don't even know how to sue the Klan would have done if it was a book. I don't know if anybody would even look at the cover or the title and just said, okay, wait a minute, there's this romance over here that I want to see. You know what I mean? So I think I would love to see more stories be interpreted as videos. Even if we're talking about short videos, but I'd love to see that happen because that's the medium we're using today on the internet, TikTok, which I don't know how to do that. I do know how to do Instagram a little bit, but that's what I would really, that's one of my dreams, to see some of these important stories become videos. Why not have a video series And they can be random stories, they can be themed stories, but I'd love to see that happen.
And you never run out. You never run out.
You would not run out, because there are still so many stories out there waiting to be told.
I want to open it up now for questions. Yes.
I'd just like to prompt the idea of, I know that we have talked previously together about today, and I know that Mr. Dixon mentioned patience and the value of understanding this takes time. I think that Ms. Hubbard said that too, and I wondered if you might elaborate on that real quickly before answering questions, because I think that's something today with the very short attention spans and everything being immediate, just recognizing the patience needed in this work.
So this work is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And you have to think about the long game, because you're dealing with people. And you're really trying to mobilize the power of people. Now, your counterweight is maybe money, power, and money and power can move just like that. But when you're talking about people power, you got to move as the people move. And so there may be fear, there may be trepidation, there may be hesitation, there may be just a variety of emotions that you've got to work with when you're dealing with the people. And so you have to think about taking sometimes baby steps. But you can't lose sight of the vision, and you have to be very, very focused, very again, methodical, and trying to again move forward. So it's so the patience is really a virtue in terms of telling the story, cultivating the story, and as I hear Miss Daniel tell it, and even Miss Hubbard share her experiences, finding the moments when people who have resources will invest in what you're trying to do. So sometimes that takes years. It doesn't happen overnight. So you have to have that very that vision. And I think we'll resonate on this. Where there is no vision, the people won't perish. So you got to have a vision, and so you have to think again with that long-term kind of strategy. Yes.
No, I think she asked for you.
Oh, sure.
It's okay.
I would just say, in regards to patience, don't do it if you don't love it. You gotta love what you do. I have some people now, friends and family, who says, I'm gonna do a book like you did. Anybody can write a book. And then, like 3 or 4 or 5 years later, they came back and said, how in the world did you do that? So I say, don't do it if you don't love it, because like everybody on the panel has said, history can be very challenging. And it's not a sprint. It's really not. You can sprint, but you're probably gonna run out of energy and motivation. So my thing is, if you know you don't like it, if you know you don't really like history, don't do it. That's all I can say. Let someone else who has a love for history and support them. Let them do it and support them.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Michelle Daniel, the daughter, the favorite daughter, as she puts it, of Julie Daniel. I do have a question. Being raised by my mother and my father, she's very positive, and you get what you get with her. But as my generation, and especially the next generation, my children, and their children one day, it's not palatable to use the word colored, to grow up going to lynching museums or the black cemetery, and it's painful to research what we have suffered as a people, and to find that what is that sweet spot that if you had to get in the elevator at the first floor and you were riding with them to the third floor, and they're passionately committed to our people and Black Lives Matter, how do you tell them how you overcome such a painful place, but why? So I know it's a loaded question, but I recognize it being so critical to tell the story, or the story is lost and or repeated, as you also eloquently put. But how, even if you love it, how do you dig when it breaks your heart and you want to gasp and say, I just want to walk away from that and be in a happy place wherever that place is, when it's critical what you all are doing and what this place represents and those who have gathered here And I'm gonna flip it back and ask, even, again, elevator, you know, you get that, what, 20 seconds? So I'm only asking, if you had to tell it, what is the word you would use for how you dig? For me, it's, I watched her survive. I know she integrated to school. And I know that my cousin, her first cousin, integrated to school, they blew up. But I know that if my mom could survive, that me and mine will survive. So that's my word, if that gives you a prompt.
That's a good question. I got an answer.
One word.
One word?
You know, it's your show, so however you want to do
However I
it.
want to do it. Well, I do want to say that you do have to be careful in doing this research and interviewing elders about traumatic things that they've been through. Because you think you're just interviewing somebody about something, or you're just researching a lynching or an atrocity, but your body absorbs that stuff. And you have to take care of yourself. So, but one word, I think methodical. Like, you have to be methodical when you're looking and researching this stuff, because nobody else is going to be. Nobody else is going to look at it.
I don't know if I have a word. I want to pick a word. I'm going to say perseverance. So in doing this work, finding the historical, telling the story, wanting people to be proud, wanting to showcase the dignity of the people, I would argue that there's a great need for perseverance. There's going to be a lot of forces that will question. Some of the questions are going to be, well, why is this necessary? Quick aside, at the Langston Center, for example, we respect the past by telling the story of Langston High School and the period of 1896 to 1965, so legal segregation. And we want to convey that even if there are issues with 1619 to 1865, period of slavery, right? Certainly 1896 to 1965, we know that's real. I mean, the law, Jim Crow, it's real. We would not be in the building had it not been for legal segregation. So when we tell that story about the past, we've had individuals say, why do we have to talk about this?
Yeah.
Why don't we talk about today and talk about the future? And so I absorbed that, and through the Langston Center, we said, well, let's recognize the present and the fact that the Langston Center sits in the poorest census tract in the city of Johnson City. And there are certain disparities. Child poverty, for example, in Johnson City is 20%, but in that census tract is 54%. So let's talk about the now. And so let's persevere even through the comments, the attacks, the suggestions, and the overt gestures that people are going to extend. We know that the work is important. Now, if I'm doing the work out of some kind of animus, I promise you, everything I say may resonate, may click, but at some point it will fall because there is a type of vitriol that I am espousing. There's a certain way that you've got to take the hurt, the anger, the frustration, and it has to be channeled. It's got to be channeled. Otherwise, you could stroke out. You could stroke out. So you've got to channel all of that and then be very focused. So I would use the word perseverance in doing this work.
You got a question?
It's your turn, it goes down the list.
Oh. Okay, I don't know, I think you're.
One word.
No, I don't have one word. I'm sorry. In dealing with research or whatever, I have the attitude, I don't take things personally, you know. And I definitely, I don't want to say at my age, but I'm very thankful for my age. I try to keep the whole armor of God on. I'm like I'm on the battlefield. So, you know, you don't take things personal. And that's just the way I don't get caught up in, I don't sweat the small things, do I, Sharon? No. Just move on. That's my theory. Okay.
Okay, so I have one word, but it's not as good as their word. Mine is vacation. It really is. Even if it's not out of town, a vacation away from my computer, because it can get really stressful.
That's true.
I just take a vacation.
That's good.
I want to get back to my cousin's question to the cousin.
Okay.
But you started on something in answering that question.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the degree of difficulty on both sides of telling this story that we have to walk through. It's just as painful on my side as it is their side, if you will, and that's poor wording, forgive me for that. But there's an equality of upsetness that we get, or can get. So my question was, what was each of you, if you don't have an answer, fine, what was your intent when you started? And has it changed today based upon what you've managed to walk through? Because I'm sitting out here and I ask myself the same question, what is my intent? I don't intend on stepping on toes. They're out there to be stepped on. Inadvertent, and it may happen. But what was your intent when you started? And has it changed over your time period of being in it?
So for me, the intent was, how do we build community?
Okay.
So living in Jonesboro all my life, and then the images that I see of Central Appalachia don't look like me. And I'm saying to myself that I love beans and cornbread with the best of it.
Amen.
And so, there's all these things that make up our region, and I'm seeing images, and I'm saying to myself, well, where are we in these images? This is my community, and I'm just as much a part of this community. Even down to the point, and I may really show myself on this one, but my father was born in 1930 in Jonesboro. And he remembered in the days, every Saturday night, WSM radio and the old Grand Ole Opry, and listening to Hawkshaw Hawkins and Cowboy Copas. And here I am, even to this day, loving Gentleman Jim Reeves and, old country music. And so when Ken Burns did his documentary, it really touched me, because I remember so well every Saturday night listening to the Grand Ole Opry. We absolutely had to. Now that defined me. So now when I hear people talk about Appalachia, I'm trying to figure out, how do we build community, because I'm just as much a part of Appalachia as anybody else. But for some reason, we have either erased or ignored or tried to detach. So for me, the intent has always been, how do we build community? I have to tell the truth. We have to uncover the truth in order for us to, recognize the fact that we're not so different, in the fact that, again, the music that a lot of folks love so dearly in bluegrass, one of the instruments came from the continent of Africa. In our own unique way, we are intertwined. So how do we build community? How do we find some kind of way to explode this thing called race? Because we realize that race is a social construct. It's totally man-made, contrived. And so for me, that's been the intent. Now, living in 2024, I've seen more regression. But I have to say that in Jonesboro, through my political work and different things, that has been our platform. And we have tried with every bit of our ability to try to convey the fact that we are a community. And part of being a community is respecting individuality. By respecting individuality, we come together, but we have to have a common notion or a common goal to move forward. And so for me, that has been the intent of doing this work, is trying to, again, uncover this history to try to figure out, how do we build it.
guess my comments, and I'll try to be brief, is show respect and love. And I want to give an example that came to me. I've been a member of the Auburn Springs Historical Society 25 years. And most of the time I'm pretty much one or two of the only blacks in that group. So we took a trip to Green McAdoo, and this one white lady said to me, she said, you know what, they had a gentleman in their house, and he would walk the kids, he was a black guy years ago, to their church and do different things. But she says, you know what, she said, we never invited him to church. And so I think what it is, it made me sort of sad for her to a degree, but I had compassion, and you have to have love and show respect. But I think it's awareness, and sometimes people are, you know, just now becoming aware of it. So maybe just show a little bit of compassion, you know, because like you said, it's on both sides, you know, and that's what they're dealing with. I'm going to use Oak Ridge again, with race relation. It's on Grove Center. Do you mind telling that website is open to the public, and they have the best, they call it supper?
I believe it's the Oak Ridge periodic tables. If you put that in your Google search, it should take you to the website, Oak Ridge Periodic Tables, and it's ran by Pastor David Allred of the High Places Community Church in the Grove Center.
Right.
But he has these suppers at different churches to foster and build community within Oak Ridge.
Thank you.
Okay, my original intention, if I remember your question, my original intention, as I said earlier, was just to find these stories and share them and shed some light on these people. But today, my intention has changed a little. I love to focus on, well, everybody, but especially children.
Mm-hmm.
But I like for them to know that greatness cannot be suppressed just because you don't have any money, or just because you're black, or just because you don't have a car, or whatever your challenge is. Because these people did not have the internet, they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have TikTok, they didn't have all this stuff, and they still made their mark.
Yes.
So I always tell them, if they can do it, you can do it too. So that's my new intention.
And
Thank you.
with that, we're a little over time, but we'll take y'all's two questions. I'm a soft.
I just want you to tell people a little bit about Black in Appalachia.
Oh. So Black in Appalachia is an organization. We started doing this work 11 years ago to document black narratives in Central Appalachian region, East Tennessee, Western North Carolina, the coalfields, Southwest Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, a little bit of Southeastern Ohio and West Virginia. And so we did that. It's the same thing, like you see the need, and the need is so vast that we really developed out of a project with East Tennessee PBS, Public Television, and the need is so vast to document and make our history available that we basically created a mechanism to do everything we possibly can, whether it's census data collection, slavery data collection, synthesis, short documentary films, a podcast, transcribing and digitizing black school records as a resource, digitizing your stuff that you mailed me from, and so creating a community history database, everything, selling books, curating books, getting books from black authors about stuff in the region and selling those. So yeah, it's really everything we can possibly do to try to make sure our narratives are available. That's not lost.
Do you have a link or something you can use to get more information from that?
Blackinappalachia.org.
Thanks.
Not a very good salesperson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I've enjoyed my time here, and I wrote a few things down. Tell the truth, so much we don't know. There's a lot of things we do know, and I am similar to you, Mr. Dickinson. I grew up with a grandmother who was born in 1916, in Hancock County, Tennessee. And so we have the Melungeons there. And I'm trying to make my question make sense, but I'm also the board president of Varney Community Historical Society. And we have a story to tell, but is it our story to tell? Because we're white. And I have that, I'm guilty of being a white male with that privilege, and that's it, guilty of that. So what can we do and use our resources to tell the story of the African American community in Hancock County? Does that make sense?
So, one answer that I might provide is beginning to build authentic relationships with individuals in the community. If possible, building those authentic relationships, not just transactional, but sincerely relational. There are folks who want to tell the story, but I think Mr. Ison brought it out that the trauma of the story sometimes, the difficulty of the story sometimes, and then when you start getting into specifically the Melungeon experience, there's I know that just from personal experience there in Johnson City, some individuals Melungeon and were glad to be black. Some individuals that were Melungeon and were not as proud. I'll say it that way. So there's difficulty there, but I think in terms of building authentic relationships with individuals, trying to, it may take, again, time, but to persevere in building those relationships, and maybe even trying to provide supports for individuals to tell their story. So like the Melungeon Heritage Association, Heather and Alina, I would encourage, and again, you already have a connection there, I would encourage maybe even working with somebody like Heather to again, try to have Blacks in Appalachia, Heather, others, to try to have some capital, if you will, to connect with people to try to tell that story in its fullness.
I would say, people have asked a similar question before. Like, if you're in a community and there was once a black community and nobody's there anymore, how can a white person tell that story? But I think if there's nobody there anymore and you can't find any descendants, then who's going to tell that story? If you've got the energy and the will to research that and help make it available, then maybe just run it by your black friends before you share it.
Because, I know some of that story is going to disappear because of the folks not being here, right? And I find that very disheartening.
Could I just say one quick thing? Your question has brought something to my attention. This same white lady, excuse me if that offends somebody, when they had lynching in Morgan County, it was almost 100 years before blacks would go out there. And she told me recently, like some of her people would help to bring the blacks out at night, would hide them in the wagon. And so she has a story to tell. And so I might need to go back and do additional work from, her. She's in her 90s now. And so sometimes we fail to collect the history. We assume it's from one group, but it's not necessarily. So thank you for your question.
And may I add something? In the publishing world, we call what you just asked own voices, like our own voices. But it's just hashtag own voices. And what different publishers try to do is, if they have a story and they know it would be a good story, but it needs to be told in our own voices, they cast out that fishing net. Now, they do provide, it could be a grant, a stipend, whatever, but they just put it out there. They put the word out there. We're looking for storytellers who know all about the, whatever it is, fill in the blank. And if you are that person, or if you know that somebody that knows something, get in contact with us. We'd love to tell the story. That's the way we started in publishing.
What was the name of that again, Lynn?
Own Voices, OWN Voices, hashtag in the beginning.
In your own voice.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank y'all for coming out and hanging around and talking to these
I want to